People of faith already have some of the strongest protections in this country. What this bill will do is allow discrimination in the name of faith, not only towards LGBTIQ plus folk, but also women, unmarried parents, people living with a disability, people from multicultural backgrounds, and people of other faiths. My question is to you, Tanya Plibersek. How could you and your party support this legislation, albeit with a few amendments, when it was possible that with the support of a few Liberals crossing the floor, you could have voted it down?
That's from Jen Van Achteren. Over to you, Tanya Plibersek.
Well, Jen's speaking from Tasmania, which does have religious protection, state-based legislation, but actually in lots of parts of Australia, people of faith don't have any protection at all. And we do think that people of faith need to have protection from discrimination and vilification, just as every Australian deserves to be protected. Jen's talking about women, people who are gay or lesbian. It is Labor that introduced the Sex Discrimination Act, the Racial Discrimination Act, the Disability Discrimination Act, because we think every Australian should be treated fairly. Every Australian should feel safe. Every Australian should be included. Right now in Sydney, if you're a Muslim woman sitting on a train and someone yells at you for wearing hijab, you've got no protection under the law from that. It's not fair that some Australians should feel unsafe.
Well, I'll just jump in there. I mean, there are assault laws, of course. So, I mean, under assault laws,
just
one
yelling
could...
at someone.
Yeah, but, I mean, a verbal assault you can still go to police if you have evidence with that. But look, I mean, the question went to, I guess, having it both ways. I mean, you made the amendments, but you let it go through. Were you trying to have it both ways with the way that you played it, rather than getting rid of this legislation altogether?
Well, we would like to see protections for all Australians. We want every Australian to feel safe and included, and that does include people of faith. We've said all along that we want to see protections for people of faith from discrimination and vilification, but they should not come at the expense of any other Australian. So our amendments went to better protecting children, and I'm really pleased that Katie and a number of other Liberals joined with the crossbenchers and voted with Labor to give protection for all children. We had a number of other amendments that went to aged care and other pieces of the legislation. It's up to Scott Morrison now to decide whether he wants to compromise and offer protection to people of faith without reducing protections to other Australians.
All right, well, it looks like
it's all too hard.
It looks like the legislation's probably been shelved, and certainly nothing can happen with it before we get to the election, and maybe Katie Allen can illuminate us on that. What's its future now?
Well, we've got, the Senate can't sit next week because there's an estimates, and then we've got 3 days, which is budget week. I think there's only 2 sitting days for the Senate, so there's 2 days. So that's it.
So it's dead. Yeah. How did it feel?
I don't like to use those sorts of words, but yes, I mean, it's hard
my phrase. At least before the election, and then depended on the government getting government back. How did it feel crossing the floor with your colleagues in defiance of your Prime Minister? He's personally very wedded to this legislation.
Well, I actually feel it's a very interesting mix of emotions, to be fair. It's hard to explain it.
You look happy.
I do. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I feel like I've stood up for what I believe in.
Good job.
Your Prime Minister won't be happy with you. I mean, you're happy, but he ain't.
I've had lots of conversations with the Prime Minister, and I suppose what I feel really thrilled about is the whole process. Our democracy does work, and I'm there representing the people of Higgins, and that's 110,000 people. But there are also other people representing other people with different views, and the contest of ideas is why I've gone to Parliament, and we've had that contest of ideas. And at the end of the day, you have to have a vote.
Can I just add in there, you said obviously thrilled with the process, but some people who weren't thrilled were the people that got hurt by the bill to start with. I think a bill that protected some people from discrimination, but indirectly or directly discriminated another group, is a crap bill that needs to go in the bin the best of the time. And you can see the emotion. Obviously, it's important to do, but it might not need to get to that level sometimes when you actually think about holistically how it could affect people.
Dylan, tell us about that date you went on when you were 16.
Yeah, so I actually went on a date when I was, because this bill actually discriminated against people with disability because in some very, very traditional parts of religion, we are a spawn of Satan because our parents did something wrong or we did something wrong. And I went on a date to Chats and Stop Shopping Centre.
Chatty.
Killed it, went to Nando's, nailed it. And we left and a preacher was there and started screaming at me that I was a spawn of Satan.
No.
And prayed for me and my date and told my date that it was a bad idea, that they were with me. Because that was the religion they believed. And when I saw this bill, I was like, that actually it somewhat protects some people to talk like that. Can confirm though, successful date somehow. So yeah.
Maybe the pastor closed the deal.
It worked for me.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But back to you, Katie Allen. I mean, if the Prime Minister can't get his team behind him, all his team, on a piece of legislation that is so important to him and that he's decided to make the centrepiece of just these brief few days in Parliament before an election is called, what does that say about his authority?
Well, the Liberal Party, as John Howard has said, and it's been repeated many times after, is, it's a broad church, and we are a party.
Yeah, but it's a church that actually has to get done the stuff that the Prime Minister wants to get done, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's also, there's the sort of moving forward of democracy. So there has been, and look, I take your point, Dylan, that whenever we have a conversation about really sensitive issues, whether it's, Grace Tame talking about her incredibly traumatic past. There will be people who'll be triggered by that, or the awful things that you have had to experience. I mean, shocking, really, in modern Australia. How absolutely.
But this wasn't triggering. This was legislation that actually enabled that as an institutionalised discrimination. That's a different thing altogether. So the point about discussing these things, I kind of am someone who believes that it's important to shine a light, and so I think Dylan's point was about introducing it in the first place, wasn't it, rather than discussing it?
Yeah,
Rosie,
but I think there are people who literally believe things that, in my view, I don't feel comfortable with. But having the conversation is important to bring Australians together.
I think for many it's sickening that we're even having this debate, and I think it's incredibly harmful to so many, and it reminds people of the plebiscite and all of the discourse and discussion and analysing, when really this is everybody should be able to be safe and accepted for exactly who they are. And I think as we enjoy the debate, it's incredibly damaging for those who are transgender or queer or on the spectrum of diversity in whatever way, shape or form it looks like. And I think that is what's really hurtful. And it must be terrible to think as a society, we've gone beyond this surely, but no, we have not. And it's a really slow process, I think, and I just find I find it distressing listening to everybody having a point of view about this. And what would I know? This is not a world I understand. But young people are so embracing of this, and you've talked about your children. Their difference, their gender fluidity, it's not an issue for them. Why on earth are we banging on constantly about an issue that should never be raised and a problem? And I understand what Tanya was saying about, that this is, no one should be discriminated for whatever they are. But as we may enjoy and think we should shine a spotlight on some topics, it is really, really harmful. And we know, from what I understand, and I'm no expert, suicides rise every time this kind of debate occurs, because it sends a message that you're still not acceptable in today's society.